morning, and welcome to the Africa Weekly Talk. Happy Father's Day to all fathers listening and watching this program today, as well as happy Juneteenth. Today's subject on the docket is about white supremacy. It is about white supremacy and the role that the Western media and its educational institutions have played and contributed to this white superiority mindset and mentality that exists in the Western world today. And the foundation to this white supremacy mentality is embedded in the media, the educational institutions, as well as the entertainment industry. I mean, talking about Hollywood. And out of that, it has created these fringe groups of white superiority groups, ideology and all that stuff that exists mainly in Western Europe, America, as well as some part of South Africa. But for some reason, we've been made to believe that these fringe groups are the cause of hatred that exists within Western world, as well as some places like South Africa. But when in fact, the roots and the foundation of these ideologies is embedded in the very institutions in the Western world, like the media networks, the educational institutions, as well as the entertainment industry, that we revere so much. But we tend to forget that for these ideologies to exist and for these white supremacy groups to adopt to this form of ideology, they have to get this education from somewhere. And most of this education that they get from these very institutions that we revere is all around us every day. Because if you look at the history of the Western world for the past, let's say, 500 to 700 years, everything about civilization is centered on the Greco-Roman civilization. And we have been made to believe that the world that we live in today is comprised of the Western civilization and development. And rightfully so, in the sense that we all live in this world today, modern world today that we see. And everything that we see around us is basically based on Western development and civilization. So we also tend to believe that that is what it is. But unfortunately, the very institutions that is supposed to educate us, for us to know and understand what the real world and these outcomes came to be in terms of civilization and development, they have also become parts of the institutions that have also created this white superiority complex that exists in the Western world today. Right around the time of colonization and right before slavery, you had white explorers, Western European explorers, that went to Africa, that ended up in slavery as well as colonization. And whilst they were in Africa, a lot of them came to believe that the Africans were inferior. And out of that inferiority mindset that they had on the Africans also came to see themselves as inferior, because based on the educational system, the institutions that existed, and the portrayal of Africans, they also accepted that inferiority complex mindset, which unfortunately is false. If you look at the history of European Western civilization, the foundation and its bedrock rest on the ancient African civilization of Kemet, which is today Egypt. And these very European explorers around the 16th, 17th century, who having visited Kemet with their anthropologists and archaeologists and all that stuff, also came to the belief that the ancient civilization of Egypt was out of Black Africa. And it was out of that civilization that the Greco-Roman civilization that we enjoy today, that we talk about today, which is the bedrock of Western European civilization came out of the ancient African civilization. But the conflict with that truth was that because of slavery at the time and colonization, the Western Europeans could not come to the grips with the truth of their Western Greco-Roman civilization came out of ancient African Egyptian civilization. So they perpetuated these lies and falsehood, which has evolved up to this day that I'm talking. And one of them was that the ancient Kemetic civilization could never have been by Africans because of their inferiority complex and the superiority complex that they had on Africans, that somehow there's no way these Africans that they have enslaved and these Africans that they have colonized are the very people that gave them their great Greco-Roman civilization. They could never come to grips with that. So they had to concord this narrative that somehow the ancient African civilization might have come out of the Levant or Mesopotamia. But studies after studies, archaeological works, anthropology works, and everything prove otherwise. It showed clearly that the ancient Egyptian civilization came out of the southern part of Egypt, from Nubia all the way up to lower Egypt. And out of that, they were baffled by the discoveries that came about. I mean, you go to the Metropolitan Museum in New York, you go to the Penn Museum in Pennsylvania, you go to the Louvre Museum in France, you go to Russia, you go to Germany, you go to England, all these great museums, European museums, and you look at the artifacts of these great ancient African civilizations, and you see these Egyptians. There's no two ways about these people, that they were pure 100% Africans. And this is what pretty much changed the narrative of the world history around the 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th century. Because now you have a situation where the Europeans have come to believe that the Africans were inferior. And they had even got to the extent of enslaving them. And now come anthropological, archaeological evidence showing that their very civilization, their very superiority complex mind that they have, rests on the very inferior people that they claim were so inferior that they had to be enslaved and be colonized. Their existence in terms of civilization came out of these people. They could never come to grips with this. They could never come to grips with this. I mean, and out of this, it created this superiority mindset that they started setting up in the 17th, 18th century, especially with the slavery mentality that came with it. So this created this inferiority complex also within the Black and African mindset. And unfortunately, which is the saddest truth about it, the very institutions that is supposed to educate the people for them to understand the notion that somehow one race is superior over another race is bananas. That very institution kept educating people to believe that every modern civilization and every modern development that we have came about because of the Greco-Roman civilization, when in essence it was false. And these institutions know about it, but instead of educating the people to understand that the ancient Greeks themselves, I mean Herodotus, Euclid, and the Romans, Lucian, all these ancient Greeks themselves and Romans themselves attributed their civilization to the Egyptians, whom Herodotus himself said were Black Africans. Herodotus himself said they were Black Africans, and all of ancient Greek civilization came out of these people. And we have the text and everything that shows that all of these people, Homer, Herodotus, Euclid, Hipparchus, all of them went to study in where? In ancient Egypt. And these are facts that exist. So in order for them to still satisfy their egos that their modern civilization came from Greeks and never came from the black African, they have to now concoct a new idea, which started coming up in about 50, 30, 60 years ago, that somehow ancient Egyptian civilization might have been some Europeans from the Levant as well as Mesopotamia that came into Egypt and mixed with the Africans. But fellows, don't believe that stuff, man. Because if you look at the ancient Egyptian civilization, it predates all the dynasties that came in later. This is the pre-dynastic period we are talking about. I'm not talking about, going beyond even the 18th or the 25th dynasty. I mean, the pre-dynastic periods, you have all the artifacts. If you go back down to pre-dynastic periods, you see exactly that all this civilization, all these inventions, all these pyramids, astronomy, engineering, medicine, that predated the dynastic period came from these black Africans. Now, when you're talking about the Hyksos, the Greeks and the Romans, and lastly the Arabs, who just came in about 600 AD, these were later years. These were the dynastic period right after so many years, thousands of years, after the great civilization of Egypt had already been founded. That had been founded by these black Africans. But like I stated earlier also, it is not just that. So when you look at this white superiority complex mindset that exists today, you also have to come to understand that it's of no fault to these white superiority groups to have that mentality. Because at the end of the day, this is what they have been taught. This is what they have seen in the society you live in. Because everything you do within this Western society, it's about white superiority. Whether you want to accept it or not, that is a fact. Everything is portrayed in the lens of white superiority. So these fringe groups that they call white superior groups and all that stuff, they got their education of being white superiority group out of these very institutions. These very institutions that we have come to revere, which is the educational institutions, the media networks, and entertainment industry like the Hollywood and all that stuff. But what role have we Africans and black people also played in enabling this white superiority mindset? At the end of the day, if you look at colonization, a lot of times people tend to think that the Africans were just sitting there and the Europeans came in and decided to colonize and, took Africa and all that stuff. Now, the history behind colonization is simple. Initially, Europeans came to Africa to trade. As trading went on, the Europeans came in later and they decided to involve in slave trading. But with all that said, and when all these things was going on, the Africans also resisted. You have the great history of Ya Asantewaa of the Ashanti Kingdom. Then you have the issue of Nzinga of the Ndongo Kingdom in Angola, as well as the recent one about 19th century, 1896, the Adwa War led by King Menelik of Ethiopia. So we have all that history that shows that the Africans resisted this European exploitation of Africa and colonization. It wasn't like the Europeans came in and the Africans allowed this to happen. But unfortunately, when they were able to take hold of Africa and establish these educational institutions and democratic systems and all the systems of government and everything, that also has contributed to this inferiority complex mindset that most Africans have come to share today. Now, but the very fundamentals of white supremacy rest solely on the educational and the media institutions that exist in Western countries. And I want people to understand that out of these institutions is where most of these white French Nazi groups, fascist groups get their education from. Because first of all, we have been made to believe to the extent that somehow these white Nazi wearing swastikas, protesting like what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia, some years back, a couple of years ago, after the election of Donald Trump, and sometimes they were even attributing that protest, the right to unite rally led by some white groups in Charlottesville, was somehow attributed even to the election of Donald Trump. And we have come to believe that somehow these things are happening because of these fringe groups, when in reality, these things are happening because of the educational and media institutions that exist within these Western countries, and how these people have been educated. Well, first of all, you have to look at it this way, fellas. These guys, everything they consider to be white superiority is based on the education that they have received in these institutions as well as the media. So they don't come about with this mindset just because of they have to go and do their own research or anything of that sort. Everything that you see around you in any of these Western countries, you can attribute it merely to white superiority mindset. I mean, that's the fact, fellas. I mean, this is not something I'm making up. This is a fact. We can all say that. And now, and if you look at even the educational institutions that exist, and like I mentioned earlier, in terms of the ancient civilizations and how they have attributed every modern day civilization to Greek and Rome, rather than attributing it to the original civilization that these Greeks and the Romans themselves acknowledge that they got it from the Africans of ancient Kemet. So when you have institutions that refuse to educate its citizens about the truth, then who do you blame when you have fringe groups like right to white organizations and all that stuff, who believe that somehow their forefathers or their ancestors are the founders of these great civilizations and development that we all live in. And if we look around us as minorities in this country and so on and so forth, we also don't see anything around us now that makes us feel proud about our ancestors, because the history that is being told to us has always depicted the Europeans as the ones who have created these civilizations for us. So that inferiority complex kicks in among us. And fellows, there can never be superiority complex without inferiority complex. At the end of the day, somebody has to feel superiority. For somebody to feel superiority, somebody has to feel inferior of themselves. And this is how the whole system has been. So this superiority complex has come to be because of the inferiority complex that have also come to be by minorities, especially Black people and Africans all over the world. Now, a clear example was a case in the 40s that was done by a psychologist by the name of Kenneth Clark and Mamie Clark. When they did the door test, what is known as the door test at that time, where they had Black kids and white kids, and they had white doors and Black doors. And they were asked to choose among these white and Black doors which ones that they preferred. And overwhelmingly, all the kids chose the white doors, including even the Black children. And they were asked why they chose those doors. And they said the white doors were beautiful and the Black doors were ugly. Fellas, I mean, these are kids. This was around the ages of 5, 4, 5, all the way to 9 years old children. And they had this mindset that the white doors were more beautiful than the Black doors. And even the Black kids, overwhelmingly, majority of the Black kids also prefer the white doors. And this is not by accident, because these kids were making these choices based on what they have come to see in the society they live in, where everything white is considered to be better and everything Black is considered to be ugly. So, I mean, if you go back to this test, and then you're looking at the ideology of white superiority, then you have to understand the ideology of white superiority is embedded in the very institutions that we revere today in this modern day. Because these are the very institutions that created this ideology of white superiority. Because if not for these very institutions promoting the idea of white superior over other races, you won't have a situation where you have black children picking white doll because they believe that the white doll is a beautiful doll and the black doll is ugly. That's a reality. But unfortunately, we Africans and black people have also contributed to it, to the extent that some of us black people have had this inferiority complex mindset to the point that now we think that by trying to emulate or to look white makes us even beautiful. I mean, look at a clear example about the invention of the curling iron. When the curling iron was first invented, you had black men, even like James Brown, musician, perming their hair, straightening their hair to look like white men. And then you had black women perming their hair, straightening their hair, which they have been doing up to this day to look like white women. And now, if you are of a black race, a unique race, first human, according to every anthropology, ecological study that have been found, to be the first original human, Homo sapiens sapien, that you have lived thousands and thousands of years long before any other race came to be. But now you look at yourself as inferior to the race that came after you. Then what else is it going to be? What else is it going to be? Do you expect that race that looks superior to you to consider themselves inferior? Heck no. So this white superiority mindset is not just about what you see around you. It's about the mindset of African Americans and black people all over the world. And we have played a key role in the contributing to this white superiority mindset. And not until we revert to accepting and acknowledging that we ourselves have to be proud of ourselves first before we can complain about somebody saying that they are white and they are superior than us. I'm sorry. This thing is not going to end anywhere. So, fellas, to make it a long, short story, you guys have a great Sunday. Enjoy your Father's Day. God bless you guys and wish you all the best. And if it's Sunday, it's the African Weekly Talk. Thank you and peace and love.